Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm flying solo this week. Vance has some pertinent things he must do. I have no idea what he's doing, but he's not here now. So I'm going to be running the show. Today we have Tyler Boyle in the hot seat. Spirit artist, a term once used to describe Tyler's niche in the visual world, now used to describe his uplifting and inspiring energy and performances. Tyler's an entertainer, host, MC, hype guy, and speaker. Since 2012, he's been working in the festivals and events industry as a dancer and hype guy. In 2017, he was invited to perform at TEDx Collingwood, then invited back the following year as the host. He also has hosted various Pride events, his local chapter of the popular show Dragon's Den. In 2019, Tyler participated in Speaker Slam, Canada's #1 inspirational speaking competition. Gonna find out about that. His talk entitled Sabotaging My Dating Life went viral after it was posted online. Tyler is also a painter and sculptor specializing in spirit art, where he explores the theme of masculinity and the gay male experience. As an elementary school teacher, Tyler is a recipient of the 2020 Prime Minister's Award of Teaching Excellence and the 2020 Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario's Award for a local humanitarian. Additionally, Tyler is an educator and resource consultant for a progressive education company called Moving Education. Currently, Tyler is working on expanding the Dreamwalkers Meditations Project. Dreamwalkers is a mental health resource of guided meditations for youth in schools. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, listening to your own bio is so cringe. It's like, you know, those moments where you're like, what do I do with my hands? What do I do with my face?
Well, I wanted to go, girl, when do you sleep? That's what I want.
Sleep is
That's where I am.
I don't need no sleep.
I guess, yeah. I've got a doppelganger. They just nudge him when I have to go out and do the rest.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Oh, would that we could. Anyways, why don't, for folks who don't really have an idea of what we're talking about here, why don't you explain a little bit about what it is that that motivates you to do this, and how you came about, finding this niche in the visual world as you've described it in your bio.
Right. So I am one of the lucky ones with adult ADHD, where I have made it work for me, where I took all of my hobbies and all of my passion projects and all of my hyperfixations, and I pushed through enough to turn them into something, hence the complete dog's breakfast of that bio. I've done a little bit of everything, and I just follow where my calling is, where my passion is, where my heart is. The primary things that have stuck is that I am an elementary school teacher. I am a professional hype guy and entertainer, and I am a speaker. I love each of these things, and because each one of the things that I'm passionate about, I can insert under those three umbrellas and figure out new ways to connect with people, new ways to communicate with people. So I found my niche in the speaking world quite by accident. That started when I began teaching and started running the assemblies at our elementary school. And I realized this is not something that people like doing. Even teachers who are used to being up in front of crowds, they were not used to being up in front of all 600 students at once. And that's something that came very naturally to me, and I liked it. From there, I found my way into the entertainment world. In the entertainment world, I'm a hype guy and dance entertainer. So I basically show up to festivals and events and I yell at people to dance with me until they do. And I've been doing that for about 10 years, and it's the coolest job in the world.
Just be careful when they come to you with the little white jacket.
Yeah.
One of those wraparound fit all.
Yeah, but you know what? I would make it work. I would absolutely make that work for me. So in that world, I started to stumble across people who saw my show and say, "Hey, have you ever thought of doing hosting this event for us? I believe." You in the States have a show called Shark Tank. Is that right? So we have a show called Dragon's Den, which is basically the same thing.
Yeah, Shark Tank is it's really funny. I always find it interesting that you have these shows that start in Britain and even in Canada, and then they come across here and they're I don't know. I find our U.S. version a little like compared to the British ones that I've seen. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, the second go around is never as good as the original ever.
Right, exactly.
So I was doing a show once, and I had this gentleman come up to me, and he said, "I'm the director of the local chapter of Dragon's Den. Would you host the show?" And I'm a big believer of ready, fire, aim. I will say yes to something and figure it out later. If my gut says right away, yes, that sounds unique and exciting, and I have no idea how to do it, I will say yes. And so I said yes to hosting the show. I was the host for the show for 3 years. It was a live show. And that opened up the door for me to have the stage confidence now in front of complete strangers to start a speaking career. So mixed with my experience, motivational speaking in my elementary school, now my familiarity with working with adults and complete strangers, I now found myself all the little ideas that I had been journaling about that I'm like, this is something that's been on my mind. I went, that could be a talk. And suddenly I found myself in the speaking world where now I write talks either for specifically aimed toward a client that wants to talk about a certain area or arena, or I present a talk and pitch it and see who picks it up. I obviously prefer to have the talk, have it bubble up inside me and then spew out onto paper and then present that and pitch that over somebody being like, can you please fit in this box? I don't mind the creative challenge of it, but obviously for any artist or any writer, we like to kind of have the freedom to do what we want rather than fit in a box first. But I do appreciate the intellectual and the creative challenge of fitting into somebody else's box. So I typically don't say no to those opportunities either.
So, child, I'm getting total I aspire to be Frankie Bernstein vibes from you.
Listen.
When you're in your 70s, we're gonna come back and see if you've got like the long hair, the beads, the bracelets.
Listen, it's not too far away. And as I said, if I can make that white jumpsuit work, as you put the straight jacket, I can make Frankie Bernstein vibes work as well. I think yes.
Lily would be very proud of you.
Yeah, I say yes.
All right. So you have two talks that we have down on our notes here, Being Extraordinary and Never Have I Been in Love. You have a note saying creative and writing process involved in crafting a talk. Let's talk a little bit about first what those two talks are. And you said earlier in the pre-show discussion that they're kind of integrated. So maybe explain what that's about, and then let's talk about how you approach that process when you're creating one of these.
Sure. I'll start with the beginning there of just addressing the two talks that we're talking about specifically here. My talk, Being Extraordinary, was something that a local Pride event had asked me to create for them. They said, would you come and be a keynote speaker for us for Pride? It was during COVID, it was online, which actually worked to the advantage, well, many advantages, because it was online, it was more easily shared. I could set it up with a nice background in that to make it a moment in time that could be shared. Sometimes when we film a speaker speaking on a stage, it can fall flat a little bit if it feels like they're not speaking to you. So it actually worked out in our favor. The Being Extraordinary talk, as soon as they said, is there something that you could speak about to our audience? I said yes. Because a part of my writing process now, knowing that I have crossed over from somebody who just journaled a lot into somebody who is now writing and then speaking, I'm obsessed with Evernote, the app Evernote. Do you know it? Oh my gosh,
yeah.
I love it. So anytime that I have an idea or I'm having a conversation, having beers by the campfire, and I happen to say something really intelligent, those rare moments, or the person I'm talking to says something really intelligent, I immediately see the potential for an entire talk. So I write that down in Evernote, just the one line or the one idea or the one thought that I know that could be unpacked that a lot of people need to hear. Connecting back to the being extraordinary talk, the thought for me that I had always had, I identify as a gay male, and I was always obsessed with the idea that I had put myself so deeply in the closet for 32 of my 39 years that when I finally came out at 32, I realized that my life was better than I had ever imagined for myself. My dreams were only as limited as the walls of my closet before. So I had packed myself away and my future away into just darkness and shadows, where I didn't see a future for myself because I was just living day by day. Dreaming too much about the future was either terrifying because I saw myself, let's say, marrying a woman, or terrifying because I was out. And what about hate? What would my family think? What would my friends think? And so I became fascinated with the idea of a life better than I ever could have imagined, because that's something unique about the LGBTQ experience. As somebody who is straight and cisgender, typically as they grow up and they start to, in elementary school, hold hands with a member of the opposite sex, which is something I never did. And then in high school, kissing somebody under the park bench, which is something I never did. Park bench? No. The bleachers.
I was going to say, how big are your people?
Yeah. Not only that, but what are they on? What pills did they take? What kind of party is this?
It's a shroom party.
That's right. Yeah. Probably worse if they're under a park bench making out.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So these are experiences that I never got to have, and a future that I never saw for myself. And it was all an act, right?
Mm-hmm.
So picturing, once I had come out and realizing that I was now living a life beyond something I had ever imagined for myself, that was the idea I wrote down in Evernote. So when they came to me, Pride Collingwood came to me and said, "Do you have something to say?" I said, "Heck yes, I do," because the note was already there for me. So there's I don't know, 25 different ideas for talks in there. And then when a client comes up to me and says, "What can you say to our audience?" Typically there is something in there that I can pull from. And then that way I can have a little bit more creative control. If they're saying, "I want you to talk about entrepreneurship. I want you to talk about the gay male experience. I want you to talk about masculinity. I want you to talk about life as an artist." These are all things I can pull from because the notes are there. And then the interesting thing about being a speaker and the writing process is that as a writer, I get to kind of build build a narrative and build a roller coaster for everybody. And yes, a good talk is like a roller coaster. However, it's one idea, not several ideas, not several chapters. It's one idea where you have picked it apart and added stories and vulnerability to it. So I have 6 to, let's say, 20 minutes to fit in an idea that everybody can relate to. It's a very fascinating process, and it differs a lot, I assume, because I'm not a novel writer, from that writing process. I have to fit into certain boxes rather than just write from a place of pure creativity. There is a little bit of in the boxedness, right, that I require. But it's a kind of good for my ADHD, or else I would just talk forever.
Well, you're on a talk show, so you know.
I know. Here I am on a podcast.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I find the topic really fascinating, and here's why. I'm from the beginning part of the Gen X era, okay? And I guess my experience is so unique in growing up gay. You know, I now identify as queer, even though I'm a gay man, and I accept that. And I'll get to why queer specifically. But I never had any of that. Oh my God, people are going to think odd of me. Oh my God, I never put those coats or jackets on in that closet. around 9 or 10, I figured out I liked boys, and it was just, oh, okay. And I just didn't, but I didn't necessarily pursue it. I kind of knew the social norms. So I just kind of maneuvered in my world the way that I figured out how. And it wasn't until I happened to be in a bookstore at around the age of 16, and I had just had my first job. And so I had my own money to spend. And I was in a bookstore and I happened to run across The Lord Won't Mind, which is a book written by Gordon Merrick, who was a bisexual writer. And he wrote this kind of sweeping romance love story. And when I found that book and I started to read it in the store, I remember becoming like overheated and sweaty little prepubescent, a teen, kind of thing going on. But it gave me the idea that, oh, there's a future. And oh, this was placed in the 1920s. That means there were some before me. And oh, I saw all of these light bulbs started going off. So
Mhm.
as I got into my teen years, I never worried that I won't have this.
Mhm.
I always just assumed it would be.
Mhm.
And, I was explaining this to my husband last night because I had watched a video and I was talking with my husband's a retired psychiatrist. And I said, I find it fascinating from my perspective because I'm a Gen Xer. We didn't have the internet when I was a teenager. We didn't have any real way to find the queer community. I grew up in San Diego, which is a very naval town. Um, and so, I had to deal with all of the same things that many queer people have to deal with in their budding sexuality as they develop. But yet, I never felt threatened. And I don't know if that's because my father's Native and my mom was Latina. And so family was a really big thing. And the way that both cultures approach family is it's very, very, I don't know how to describe it. It's just that there's an unconditional line of love. And even if
Mhm.
you do something that perceivably would cast shame, it becomes a situation where it's not something that is life threatening in most cases. And I do have a lot of Latino friends who are queer and who have different experiences than I did. And I think my father had a great deal of that because his approach to rearing myself, my sister, my brother was that he gave us enough freedom to discover who we were, and then he supported whatever that was, as long as it didn't bring harm to anybody. So my whole perspective on growing up queer, I was aware of the dangers, I was aware of getting beaten up, I was aware of all this stuff, but I never let it keep me in a closet. I
Mhm.
never, it just never seemed to be something that I would put on. I just never considered it. So, in watching your video, I was fascinated by this whole concept and yours is not a unique story. I've heard something similar along those lines, but I just wonder, as queer people, why we feel the propensity to magnify, and this is to your point you were just making, that you imagine the closet and then you keep overthinking that closet to the point where it literally is like a pressure
Yeah.
cooker kind of situation. Have you, in your talks and discussions, have you figured out why that is a consistent narrative, or have you had enough conversations to explore that as to why queer people do that?
So great point. So this brings up a really important thing about being a speaker and writing a talk. Actually, probably for written authors as well, is that one cannot write from a place for for your audience. Okay, stick with me on what I mean by that. If when I did Speaker Slam, Canada's #1 most popular speaking competition, when I did that, there was a lot of rules that you had to fit into, and like, do this, and if you want this, then do that. If you have opportunity to go viral, then do this. When when I was preparing for that speech, those boxes started to tunnel my vision a little bit too much. My creativity and my emotions wouldn't flow. So as a writer, I had to write the speech that I needed to hear. And so as you listen to my Being Extraordinary talk, your experience, you couldn't really relate to it as you've recounted for us. It was something that you found curious because it wasn't your experience at all. If, let's say, as a new writer, and you and I were tight friends, if I went to you for advice and I said, this is what I'm going to talk about, you would go, well, that's not my experience. And what I might do is stifle my creativity and go, well, then it's not a good idea to talk about. And so because it's my experience, I ended up sharing my experience with the world over this platform. In 48 hours, it had 250,000 views. Because clearly there was a message there that people needed to hear, whether it was straight people, whether it was gay people, I'm not sure. So I had to write the message that resonated with me. So as new writers out there listening, or new people wanting to get into the speaking world, if you write from a place of trying to really, really reel in your audience, you might have a lot of trouble. You have to find the message that resonates best with you and trust that there's one person in the audience that's really going to get it, 100 people in the audience that are really going to get it, 50 people on the internet that are really going to get it, 150,000 people on the internet that are really going to get it. So that's why we have to write from a place of us and our experience.
Sure, it has to have heart. It has to be rooted in
Amen.
heart. Yeah. So what's up next for you? What have you got going? And where's the best place for people to follow you when you're out there?
You can find all the information about me at www.tylercboyle.com or dreamwalkersmeditations.com. And Dreamwalkers Meditations, what's coming up next for me is really just pouring my creativity into writing meditations, learning about the mind, and mental health strategies, and bringing that to youth in schools to help this world be a little less fuckery for everybody.
There you go. There you go. Amen. All right. Any final words of wisdom?
No, thank you so much for today.
All right. Well, everybody, we just wanted to let you know about Tyler and all of the wonderful works he's doing. We highly encourage you to follow him on his socials. We will make sure we have those links in our description of this video and also on our webpage at ropepodcast.com. We'd like to thank Tyler for being here today. Thank you so much. And if you have something happening in the future and you want to come back and share it with everybody, feel free to come back. It's not a one-time deal.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. I'm going to tell everybody right now that this conversation actually went long for us. So we're going to have an edited version on the YouTube channel. But for our patron subscribers, they can see the full episode up on our Patreon channel. So if you want to get that whole talk, and it's a wonderful conversation, I highly encourage you to help us keep the lights on and become a subscriber on our Patreon. All right. Well, that's it for us this week, and we will see you again. Thanks, Tyler.
You're welcome.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I am Baz Collins here with my co-host, Vance Bastian.
Hello, hello, hello.
And today we are reviewing an older film, but it's one of these true crime films. And actually, there's a tie-in. Huh?
True-ish.
Well, any movie is going to be playing with, have literary license or, artistic license. I mean, true crime is I'm just saying it did happen. This sequence of events did happen. It may have not happened exactly. They may have condensed for dramatic purposes, but ostensibly it is a true crime story.
Right.
And I do remember when all of this hit in the 90s. And I remember watching it on 2020, or it might have been, it wasn't 60 Minutes, but it was one of the kind of documentary-esque, newsy kind of thing I think it was 2020.
Mhm.
And they did a whole episode on this story. What we are reviewing is A Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. And while not a gay story in that it is heavily involved in a romance or a relationship that most people would say qualifies as a gay story, at the very core of the true crime and the story itself is a gay relationship. So it and there's enough queer representation. We also have a real life character of Lady Shipley, played by the actual Lady Shipley,
Hmm.
transsexual
Entertainer.
entertainer, yes, goddess, the empress, the
The,
doll.
the Empress of Savannah.
Yeah. Um, and it's just, this movie, I read the book, after I watched the movie. So I get when you're saying ish, because yes, and it's interesting. The book is done more as vignettes
Hmm.
than it is a complete linear and then, and then, and then, and then, and then. I thought John Cusack, it's one of my favorite John Cusack films of all time. I love
Interesting.
this film. And I do remember a story he said that when they were filming this movie, because Clint Eastwood, who directed it, his daughter plays the love interest for his character.
Hmm.
And he said it was the most, out of all the movies he had filmed up to that point, he said it was the most uh, tense situation for him because he had to kiss the director's daughter on screen. He said it was a weird situation. It felt very weird.
Yeah, that'd be a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, it was kind of like, intense, he said. But anyways, okay, so this movie deals with a visiting city reporter's assignment for a Christmas party that he's been invited to cover, something very benign, very, it's a very Southern Christmas party that's kind of famous in Savannah, Georgia, where it takes place. Suddenly revolves around the murder trial of a local millionaire whom he befriends. The book was written by John Berendt. It is a very, very good book. It does give you the feel of all of the characters, and I wish I could remember the line that John, I don't know if they have the quote here, but he has one of the best lines I had ever heard. Let's see.
Well, while you're looking, I can let folks know that the millionaire isn't the one murdered. He's the one suspected of murder.
Right.
And
Um,
the actual victim is it kind of like,
a rent
hire by
boy.
day handyman,
Yeah.
rent boy, but on the surface, to the public, a handyman, played by a young Jude Law.
Yes. And it's Kevin Spacey is the lead in the film, and this falls now because of everything that surrounds Kevin Spacey. This is one of those films that if you really want to take it in, you're going to have to distance yourself from what you know of Kevin Spacey and just take in the story itself. But it is a very, very interesting and very, I think of all the Southern movies about the South that I've ever seen, this one is the one I most closely consider something that I can relate to because of the queer community that weaves its way in through it. And it also does the racial tensions in Georgia very well. You get the different class elevations and stuff within the different societies. For me, it evoked what modern day Georgia was like. And it's funny because I actually worked at that time when the film came out. I worked for Booz Allen and Hamilton, which is a consulting firm, a very large consulting firm. It's one of the big ones. And we had a executive secretary who was from Savannah, Georgia, and I got to know her quite well. And she could have easily been in this movie. I mean, the whole genteelness, the well, bless your heart, and all that stuff. She was very much like, she had pictures of Uga on her wall at work.
Nice. Nice.
So, I mean, I remember that whole feeling of, and she came from an old family of Savannah. So, you know, she would have gone through the whole debutante thing. She would have done all of that stuff. And so when I remember when the movie came out and I knew her, it lent a real air of like hitting home, because I had somebody that I knew that I worked with who was from that region, and, you know, and so it put a real spin on it for me. It made it much more real. So when I saw the documentary, the kind of news segment on 2020, it was really interesting to me because it was something that was relevant of the time, and there she was, and I was working with her. So it all made it feel very, very in the moment kind of thing for me. And we kind of discussed it a little bit, and she did know who Jim Williams was, and, you know, so, you know, that she was connected enough into the story that she knew of what I was speaking of. Let's just put it that way.
Nice.
What did you think of it? I mean, let's get your impressions.
I had never seen it before. I had actually boycotted it back in the day because so many people were unhappy with Clint Eastwood's directing. Now, again, I hadn't read the book, and I'll explain why that's important in a second here. But I hadn't watched it because I didn't want to ruin sort of the Clint Eastwood-ness that I did know by seeing something that everybody said was that bad. So I avoided it for decades. Just watched it this week for the first time. If you haven't read the book and you don't know the story, it's a gripping, enjoyable movie. And there isn't a director fail because you don't know the story. So, of course, when it was done, I went and researched what is known of the trial, because the trial feels inconclusive on purpose. The one person who did know the truth doesn't make it to the end. And so you're left with a mystery.
Yes.
As many true crimes often are.
Yes.
So I enjoyed it.
I finally found the quote that is probably one of the best lines in the whole movie. And there are several.
Oh, it's highly quotable.
It's highly quotable, this whole movie, but this sets the tone. It's spoken by John Kelso, who is the fictional writer character that Jonathan Berndt is, you know, that it's actually based on him, you know, but his name is John Kelso in it. And so he's talking with his, I guess his agent in New York. And what happens is that John goes to cover this party at Christmas time, and everything is, you know, just very, very stated. It's all very, very Southern and genteel, and John's there, and he's already befriended.
Genteel on the surface. You're also immediately hit with the decadence beneath the surface.
Oh yeah. Well, that's a lot of what I've always thought the South was, is that there's this genteelness. It's almost like the Gilded Age. You have all these prominent society families who present such a visual facade over something that is decrepit and decadent, and it's got a lot of unseemliness that happens, but we don't talk about it.
No,
we just don't talk about that, you know. And that's kind of the feel of this. But anyways, so John's talking to, it's just after the party he covered, and then the revelation that suddenly it's a murder situation and the whole story has evolved. And John Cusack's line,
Garland, forget about town and country. Yeah, I know, I've only been here 3 days and it's just a shooting, but give it time, okay? This place is fantastic. It's like Gone with the Wind on mescaline. I know you're my agent. Listen to me. They walk imaginary pets here, Garland, on a fucking leash, all right? And they're all heavily armed and drunk. New York is boring. I'll call you later.
It's the best damn line. Because that line explains the movie. That should have been the tagline for this film. Because it says everything you need to know about the character level of, and every single person in this movie is a character. even the
Turned up to
minor,
11.
yeah, even the minor actors or the actors who play minor roles,
Mhm.
if they weren't there, you would miss it. And there are a number of actors who are in the movie that actually were real life people from the actual true crime story.
Yep.
So Lady Chablis, one of them. The judge in the courtroom scene was actually the attorney that was Jim Wilson's attorney. And I think there was the lady inside the restaurant, the little diner. She was also the actual lady that was in it. So it does again lend that air of realness by having some of the people who were actually part of the whole thing in the actual movie. So it's a very, very, and I have to say, this movie had me from the very opening sequences with Katie Lang, another queer artist, singing my all-time favorite Johnny Mercer song, Skylark. Out of all the songs from that era, that is my all-time favorite song. I just love the melody so much. And to hear her sing it a cappella in the beginning over the visuals as you're making your way into Savannah, with crane shots and drone shots. Of course, they didn't have drones back then, but then they had the helicopter shots and stuff.
Right.
But it's quite amazing and then you settle in on the statue in the garden of
The bird girl.
the balance, the bird feeding one. And it's interesting that it became so famous because of this movie. They actually had to move it away from that park because it became too much of an attraction, and people were worried about the actual park that it was in, that it was going to get destroyed over time. So this movie does have a bit of a fervor about it in its history. And really Jim's character that Kevin Spacey plays, you really make, and this is actually, I actually quoted it in one of our other reviews. I can't remember. I think it was the Gilded Age. Yeah, it was the Gilded Age. So I said the quote, and I was quoting from this film where he said he's nouveau riche, but then again, it's the riche that counts.
Yeah.
And that's very much Jim is a self-made millionaire who lives in Mercer House, and that's what the tie-in is to Johnny Mercer. Now, nobody from the Mercer family actually lived in the house. That's another historical fact about it. It was built by Johnny Mercer, the lyricist. It was built by his grandfather, but he never got around to living in the house either. But it was called Mercer House because it was built by the Mercer family. So there is a tie to Johnny Mercer, and Johnny Mercer's music is woven throughout the film. So you do get a lot of that influence as well. You get the societal influences both from the Black and the white community. So you get to see those things going on. And Lady Chablis is epic in this film. And she is about as timeless and as perfectly played. Of course, she's played by the real person, so how could you not get it? But she's on the level of Joan Collins making her entrance in Dynasty, or Diane Carroll in making her entrance in Dynasty as Dominique Devereaux. Lady Chablis carries that kind of air, even though she's as foul-mouthed as a sailor on shore leave. So you have this queer representation that can play the game as well as the high society people, but play it in their own way and using their strengths to carry them through. And so it's an amazing film of queerness as reality, not as some starry-eyed let's project in the world, because it is a true crime story, so you're not going to get a romance in that respect. You do get one between John and Allison, who play the kind of love interest couple in the story, but that's almost an aside to the actual true crime story. What did you think? I'm just curious how you felt about it in the end, and I don't want to spoil it, but you did say that
someone
one
dies.
who does know doesn't make it. Yeah. What did you think of that sequence and the inference when it happens in the movie and the way they filmed it.
Oh, it's 100% art. I loved it.
Yeah, yeah. And I thought Jude Law was so good in just that whole sequence of knowing exactly how to play it, come to life, and then go back to his death scene.
Yep.
And it's very, very gripping. And you get the dynamics of resolution to the actual story, but it is open-ended. It leaves you to judge whether or not Jim actually did it,
Right.
or if he didn't. If because the story changes, it evolves over time. Jim was acquitted in real life, but it doesn't end there. So you think the trial's the big thing. It is a big part of the movie.
Sure.
But it is not the be all end all.
Historically, there were 3 trials.
Yes.
That the movie condensed into one, because sitting in a courtroom for an hour and a half is boring.
Right.
So
this wasn't Raymond Burr. So it's not one of those stories where it all takes place in court.
Right.
But the court sequences are also gripping in their own way because of the characters of the people in the story. So highly recommend it. Mine, I'm just going to give my rating across the board. They're 5s across the board. There was nothing that I thought detracted from this film. This is one of my favorite queer films that I like to go to, mostly for Lady Chablis. Dorothy, I want to give a shout out. I can't remember her last name now off the top of my head. See, Dorothy Loudon. I was right in my head. She plays Serena Dawes, who was a real character in real life. She was this high society woman who was quite debauched. And I thought she played it to perfection from what was written in the book. When I recalled her from being, and I remember how on the money she nailed it. And Dorothy Loudon was, one of my favorite Broadway actresses. So it was kind of nice to see her get this moment to really shine with a very eccentric character. So it's very well done. I loved all the actors. Nobody missed the mark in this. So mine's are 5s across the board. You do have to put that nugget in your head if you're one of those people who can't separate the artist from the art. Then be aware that this is a movie where you really need to do that in order to enjoy the meat of the story.
Right.
But I will say it is probably one of Kevin Spacey's best performances. And he and John Cusack have a really good dynamic as lead men in this story that goes on. So, So that's mine. What are yours?
Mine were 4s across the board. I thought it was highly entertaining. Nothing got in the way of anything. It told the story very well, held my attention, loved it.
And we have a t-shirt up on our Redbubble site of the Lady Chablis. So if you want to have a memento of this film after you see it, and we know you'll love it, definitely go and check out the t-shirt I designed for it of the Lady Chablis. So that's it for this week. We really recommend you watch this. Again, it's separate the artist from the art kind of film, but the story is vastly entertaining. And I know you can still find the 2020 segment that's up on YouTube that details this whole story from the news aspect of when it broke at the time it broke. And you actually do get the interviews with Jim, the actual character who was at the center of this true crime. And it was a gay true crime. So I really highly recommend that if you can find it on YouTube, you should watch it too for some context. It's rather fascinating all on its own, in addition to how the film kind of encapsulated it and condensed it for movie purposes. So that's it this week. Remember to keep making those memories, watching those movies with family and friends and loved ones. And we'll have another review for you next week. Okay. moving on.
So,
All right.
who won your week?
I'm going, I was kind of juggling it. And I think for me, I want to say women won the week for me this week. And that's because I've been watching this steady progression of women really stepping into the forum of, oh, no, you won't,
Mm.
About my body.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, you won't.
Mm-hmm.
And which I think it really is needed. And even many men commentators have said, look, if this was about men, it wouldn't be a thing.
Right.
And that's one of the arguments women are making,
Mm-hmm.
and amongst others. But this really is a pivotal brick in our wall of rights that we've built.
Mm-hmm.
And if this one gets punched out, the rest of the wall becomes very weak.
Right.
So, I want to say women won the week for me because they're stepping up, they're being loud, they're being vocal, they're engaging. And I agree with Rachel's assessment of it when she said, with this decision, when it does come down and however it's written, no matter how it's written, it will be a case of the dog catching the car and then not realizing what that really means.
Right.
So that's who won the week for me. What about you?
All right, then I'll go with my other story. Wiley College in Texas, 100-ish students attended their graduation, and the president of the college announced to them that an anonymous donor had just paid all of their college debt.
Wow.
That would have changed my life in every way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So whoever that anonymous donor is out there, you rock.
Yes. And it's an excellent way to show other people who have the wealth to do it, how they can give back to the community that they've reaped the benefits from. So, Pay it forward.
Right.
That'll be our hash for this week. Pay it forward.
Pay it forward.
Yeah. I did, and I know that we usually do who won the week last, and you haven't had a chance because of things going on in your family.
Yeah.
You haven't had a chance to watch anything new, but I did catch something new. And I want to put it on the list for us to do a review of. It is another gay true crime story, and it is The Staircase, which is on HBO. It deals with a prolific author and would-be politician whose wife is suddenly found dead at the bottom of the stairs, and he is revealed over time that he had a whole separate gay life going on that was hidden from the rest of the family. And it's kind of got a bit of the Brady Bunch-ish in that she had a daughter outside of this marriage that this takes place, and he had 2 sons from another relationship. And then they have a couple of kids together.
Okay.
So there's 5 kids total. And so it's a blended family in that respect. I didn't mean Brady Bunches and Alice B. Davis was going to show up, but it's more of, and again, this takes place in the South. Go figure. So it's got that.
What you've said so far is not what you've said so far is not intrinsically Southern.
Oh yeah, you'll see.
All right.
So that is something new that I am watching, and also I am still enjoying Star Trek, Strange New Worlds. I love this cast so damn much. So I'm really, really hoping this one pays off big time for the Paramount Plus streaming service, because I really want this one to be a success.
Yep.
Probably more than any other of their shows. This is the one that I've been waiting for. So I'm just, So anyways, that's the new stuff that I'm watching. And I have watched Julia. I took Vance's recommendation, and I not only am enjoying it with my husband as well, but and my husband actually knew Julia Child. I mean, when she would move into like the stores and stuff when she lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. He would go to the store and you always knew when she was in the store because you'd hear that laugh. and that very familiar voice. But what was interesting, she also has a sister who sounds just like her, and she would sometimes be in there, and so it was always like, is that Julia? Or kind of thing, because they both were very big personalities. So,
Nice.
I want to say thank you, because that was a great recommendation. I really am enjoying it. We're almost to the end. And by the way, it wasn't Bread's where they went to San Francisco. It was Crepe Suzette. That's
You're
where
right.
they go to San Francisco. Yeah.
It was. You're right.
Yeah. So, but it's a great show. So another one to recommend for everybody. And there is a slight queer element in that show that is quite fun, and Vance talked about it. And we'll put it up, the episode up here where we talked about it, so people can take that in as well. So that's it for our segment, What Are We On About? And Who Won the Week?
All right, folks. Well, Written on the Edge is produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or sign up as a guest, visit www.roguepodcast.com. If you enjoy learning about these artists, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. Tune in next week for your queer media fix.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.